Hey everybody, it's Katie, and today I want to talk about getting sober on the Sinclair Method and kind of reflect back on what this experience has been like for me. Getting on the Sinclair Method, being a daily heavy drinker and someone who was binge drinking till blackout most weekends, moving into someone who was a moderate drinker for my first year on the Sinclair Method, and then now where I'm at over a year and a half on the Sinclair Method and about 7 months sober. And just kind of want to reflect on what this experience has been like for me and what it's been like getting sober through the Sinclair Method as opposed to what it was like when I would try to quit drinking before the Sinclair Method through 12-step programs and just kind of white knuckling it. So to begin with, when I first got on the Sinclair Method, I had no intention of going sober. I remember I was learning about it and read something that this method has the power to return a person to the place they were in before they were ever addicted to alcohol. And they really have a choice whether or not they want to drink anymore, and people can easily give up drinking. And I was like, no way, I love to drink. Like, I didn't want to give it up. Alcohol was definitely destroying my life in a lot of ways, but I had this kind of love-hate relationship with it because I was so addicted and dependent on it. And so I was not getting on the Sinclair Method with the intention to get sober. I really just wanted to be able to drink moderately and stop binge drinking so much and, stop doing things I regretted when I was blackout drunk. Because I'd been experiencing that for about 10 years, and I tried to quit so many times, like I don't even know how many times, dozens before the Sinclair Method. And I would make it a week or a couple weeks. I made it 6 months one time, and would always wind up back drinking because the cravings were so intense and I would be triggered so much to the point where I would just finally give in to drinking. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But so I got on the Sinclair Method, and almost immediately I started to notice that I was drinking less in a setting, and I started to notice that I was starting to incorporate days without alcohol or alcohol-free days. And when I first got on the Sinclair Method, before getting on the method, alcohol-free days were basically non-existent for me, and if I did have a day without drinking, it was because I was like white knuckling it because I'd been drinking a lot or I was really hungover, and so I would just kind of force myself not to drink. But it was really hard for me to go even a day without drinking before the Sinclair Method. And so when I got on it, I remember by day 4 or so, I was like, ooh, I just don't want to drink. It just did not sound good. And that was the first time I had this like kind of resistance to alcohol. And that was amazing. And I remember feeling fear around that actually because it was after work, and typically I was always racing home or racing to the store to get wine and go home and start drinking. And I just remember at the end of the day, like, I don't really want to drink, like, really? And it was a little bit scary because alcohol was such a huge part of my routine and identity that I remember I went to the beach and I was like, well, maybe I should just drink anyway because I don't really know what to do with myself. But I remember it felt a little bit scary. And so I went ahead though, and I didn't drink that day, and I started to incorporate alcohol-free days in within like the first week I was on the Sinclair Method. Now, mind you, this isn't true for everybody. Some people go months and months on the Sinclair Method without their first alcohol-free day. Everyone is totally different in their experience, so that was just my experience. And I will say, for somebody who is considering alcohol-free days and how to incorporate those in, they're not necessarily going to be easy. And I'm not saying to force them or anything, but like I said, I felt fear because I was so used to drinking every single day that like I didn't really know what to do. It didn't feel natural. It didn't feel like right to not have alcohol every single day. But of course, as I practiced more and got more alcohol-free days, it got to be more natural. So as I was on the Sinclair Method over the course of a year, my drinking went from daily heavy drinking, regular blackouts, hangovers several days a week. I went from that state to someone who was drinking a few days a week, to someone who was drinking a couple days a week, to someone drinking 1 day a week, then 1 day a month. And that happened over the course of a year. By about a year, I had been drinking once a month for the past few months, like months 10 to 12. I was just drinking once a month. And it was so empowering, the experience of being able to go to parties and not be just chasing the next drink and thinking, oh, is there enough alcohol at this party? Or you know, like, I hope nobody drinks out of my bottle of wine because I want the full bottle for myself. Or I just bring like tons of alcohol to a party to make sure we'd have enough. Like, oh my gosh, all these things and ways that my addicted brain would try to trick me into drinking and continuing to drink. But anyway, I just remember feeling so empowered. Being able to go to social functions and like easily having one or two, or going out to a restaurant and leaving wine in a glass, and just like not being that binge drinker who was just like drinking until everything was gone. And the empowerment and just like the awe that comes from that, it was like, oh my gosh, I finally cracked the code. Like, this is it. Like, I can finally moderately drink. Because I'm sure if you're watching this, if you're someone who's had a drinking problem, you have wanted to be able to moderately drink. Like, I feel like that's the goal for so many people. We just want to be able to moderate and not overdo it. And I would always look at my husband, because he's like the most moderate light drinker I've ever seen. He's like, can just let a glass of wine sit there and have a couple sips and doesn't even think about it. I'm like, how do you do that? Like, I never got it. But anyway, I always had this like ideal that I'd be able to moderately drink somehow, and I could never figure it out on my own, because anytime I would moderate, I would just like have these cravings, and like if I was gonna allow myself to have one or two glasses, I'd be like, man, I really want another glass. Like, oh, I'd be like just trying to distract myself, all these things. But with the Sinclair Method, it was like I would have two glasses and be like, I don't want any more. I felt satiated. It felt so good. So that was the experience for the first year on the Sinclair Method, of just these you know, daily little wins of either noticing that I was drinking less, noticing that I was craving less, and seeing myself just kind of transform and slowly lose interest in the alcohol. Now that took a year. For some people it takes longer, for others it takes less. It's different for everybody, and it's not like it was perfect throughout the whole year. There was days or weeks where I'd drink more and I'd be a little hungover, and then I'd hardly drink the next week. It's up and down. That's the natural part of the Sinclair Method process. But yeah, so I started to feel so empowered around my drinking, and like I was truly back in control of it, and it felt amazing. Now, at about a year, as I said, I was drinking about once a month at that time, and I was getting to a place where I really I was starting to experience more hangovers, even though, because I was drinking once a month, I was following the Sinclair Method, but I remember I was having just like one glass of wine and I'd feel it the next day, or even feel the effects for a few days. Like, I'd be a little hungover or tired and just not feel great. And so the last few times that I drank, that was my experience, where, you know, I was really not getting any pleasure from the alcohol, because I was having such mal effects for the following day or the day after. And of course, this doesn't happen to everybody. I don't know why it happened to me, because for the first year I was like fine on the Sinclair Method. I didn't really have many hangovers. I had like a couple that weren't that bad. Didn't have any real effects from the medication other than the first couple weeks, just kind of adjusting to the medication. So it was weird that at about a year, I just noticed, like, I had not even a full glass of wine last night. Why am I hungover today? And that just kept happening, like 2 or 3 or 4 times when I was having drinks. And so I was just like, alcohol is not giving me anything anymore. Like, it's just making me feel sick. The one drink, like, it's giving me a little buzz, but I don't really even like the taste anymore. And so this is where I really started to question whether or not I wanted alcohol in my life anymore. And it took me many months to get to a place of where I decided to be sober. I would say I'd gone like 4 or 5 months without drinking until I got to the place of like, okay, I'm deciding to be sober. I'm not going to drink anymore. And that's because, you know, I have such a history with alcohol. It's kind of like breaking up with somebody that you know isn't good for you, and it's still hard to do. But during that time, I was just really contemplating what it was that alcohol was doing for me in my life. How was it benefiting me? What was it bringing me? What were the good things? What were the bad things? And the more I contemplated this, the more I just got clear on the fact that alcohol wasn't bringing me anything good anymore. In fact, like, because I was drinking so infrequently and I was experiencing, you know, more sober highs where I just felt clear mentally, health-wise, I was sleeping so well that when I would drink, it would kind of like bring me down a little bit. And it, like I said, it would last for a few days where I'd feel a little hungover or just kind of like feel the alcohol in my system, because I just became extremely sensitive to it because I was drinking so infrequently. And so I was just contemplating more about whether or not I wanted alcohol to remain in my life. And yeah, I was just doing the inner inquiry, and I wasn't like in a place where I wanted to commit and say, okay, I'm going sober, like this is the day. I really wanted to not do that because there were so many times in my past where I committed to sobriety and didn't stick to it. And back then, before the Sinclair Method too, I would commit to it verbally and like tell everyone that I was sober because I would hope that that would hold me accountable, but it would only do it for so long until I would finally get back in. And so I was a little bit afraid to like verbalize it to people and say that I wanted to be sober because I didn't want to put that unnecessary pressure on myself, because with the Sinclair Method you can truly drink at levels that are not harmful to yourself. And so like drinking 1 glass of wine once a month was certainly not harmful to me, but what was it doing for me? And so that's when I really started to think more deeply about that. And I will say one of the areas that was definitely a big consideration for me in making this decision to go sober is the social aspect of drinking. I realize how much social pressure I feel to drink, and it's not like my friends are out there like forcing drinks on me, and in fact I hang out with a lot of people who don't drink alcohol, but I was more like inflicting that pressure on myself. And of course I still get offered drinks when I'm out, and I kind of for a while had to have these awkward conversations because people were so used to me showing up to parties with like a bottle of wine or something, and I'd show up instead with coconut water and start to, tell that story of, oh, I'm not drinking anymore. And then people would inquire, and I would start to tell them more about, what I was doing and what I was going through. So I would say that was like one of the bigger components that was harder for me to kind of face, because drinking is such a part of our culture. And it's often, when you say you're not drinking, people are often curious as to why, and they want to know. And there's this unnecessary pressure that kind of comes from the outside to drink. And so, that was the piece that was hard for me. I even noticed myself, like, in the first year on the Sinclair Method, there would be social functions where I didn't really feel like drinking, and I would still take a Naltrexone and drink just to kind of like fit into the social crowd because everyone else was drinking. So it's been really interesting to kind of break free from that and not feel that pressure, not succumb to that pressure of feeling like I need to drink. And now, it's been 7 months since I've drank. It's the norm for me to not drink now, but that was kind of a pivotal moment. And when I talk to people, I hear that from others as well, because the social aspect of drinking is so, for many of us, it's like such a huge part of our drinking and our culture and what we do, and happy hours and wine, it's everywhere. And so that was a hard part for me in truly deciding to end up going sober. Now, I want to talk about sobriety now, and especially in comparison to what sobriety was like before the Sinclair Method. Sobriety before the Sinclair Method was really hard. The longest I ever went was 6 months, but pretty much like once a month I'd be trying for a week of sobriety or like a couple weeks, and I was like always trying to get sober because it was like black and white. I'd either be totally sober or totally destructive with alcohol, and did I use alcohol to destruct myself. I've had enough hangovers to last like a million lifetimes. Anyway, yeah, so sobriety before the Sinclair Method was really hard because even though I was sober and not drinking or touching alcohol, I was in this mental prison in my mind. I was craving alcohol. I was finding that I was always needing to distract myself because cravings would come on or triggers would happen where, oh my God, I would just like do anything to just like go have a drink, so I would find that I was like distracting myself. Oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Like I need to like occupy my mind so that I'm not thinking about alcohol and not triggered. And oh, I'm not gonna go to this restaurant or this bar because I'm just gonna be triggered. I don't want to hang out with this person because they drink. Like it was just this like constant exhausting mental chatter that drove me insane. Now, when I was sober for 6 months, some really good things came out of that. I did, develop myself more. I got into meditation. Like some really great things did come out of that, because it's not like it was torture morning, noon, and night. There were some insights that came from being clear and sober. But for the most part, I was battling these cravings on a regular basis constantly for 6 months. And so it was really hard. I was never really at ease. I feel like I could never really, tune in with myself on a deep level because the triggers and thoughts of alcohol were always there. And I felt like I was also taking life very seriously. Like, I gotta be sober, like, this is serious, I can't screw up, like, really afraid of relapsing, all of these things. So I just felt very, like, uptight, and also at the same time just trying to, like, do anything but drink, meaning distract myself. So it wasn't easy, and I really did not enjoy sobriety. And when I would be sober, like, whether or not I was trying to be sober or I was just, like, going a day without drinking, sobriety would always suck. Like, I was like, this is not fun. Alcohol makes everything fun. Sobriety's boring. Like, that was my experience of sobriety for so long. And I remember going to functions or parties. If there wasn't alcohol there, I'd be like, oh, when are we gonna leave? It's just funny to reflect on all this because it's so far in my past and feels so foreign to me now. And I'm so grateful for where I'm at now. But with that said, sobriety with the Sinclair Method is incredible. For me, how I can liken it to something, it's like the excitement you feel when you're a kid. And, of course, many of us have had traumatic childhoods, and we have this baggage we carry from childhood. So if you had a rough childhood, I can totally relate to that. But even with a rough childhood, there are moments that we've had that perhaps we can reflect on of, like, the greatest joy we've had. Like, for me, like, the last day of school before summer would start, and I'd feel like, anything is possible. I have the whole summer ahead of me. Like, life is great. When you get your new bike or a new toy, or you make a new friend, or you go on a trip, like, all these things that, as an adult, we kind of take for granted, but as a kid, it, like, brings about this, like, joy and excitement and, like, love of life and love of living life. That's how sobriety feels with the Sinclair Method, or through the Sinclair Method, I should say. Now, of course, it hasn't been all joy and elation the entire time, and in fact, like, this past year and a half on the Sinclair Method has been some of the more challenging experiences I've had in my life, just because I've had to kind of undo all of these ways that alcohol was kind of keeping me down and ingrained negatively in my life. But through all of this kind of development and work I've been able to do on myself, and the insights and clarity I've gained, the sobriety has really brought me into this state of joy that I feel pretty much on a daily basis. Not all day, every day, of course, but it's this feeling of joy that I can only liken to what it was like when I was a kid and had this, like, vitality and vigor and excitement for life that I haven't felt, since I was a kid, pretty much, because alcohol worked in such a way where it just absolutely kept me down and basically made it impossible for me to feel joy. And when you go on the Sinclair Method and it leads you to sobriety, if that's what's right for you, I'm not saying everybody who gets on the Sinclair Method should be sober. I think whatever works for you. Like I said, I had no intention to be sober, but I just realized it was, like, what I really wanted and what was best for me. But this sobriety, it's so different than what sobriety was like before, because, as I said, sobriety before was about me resisting triggers, kind of trying to distract myself, and, white knuckling it, really trying and, like, taking it seriously, and not ever finding a place of just, like, surrender and joy and happiness that this alcohol addiction is out of my system. Now, maybe if I would have stayed sober longer, I would have eventually gotten to that place. But I know that there's this just massive difference for me in the sobriety experience I have now versus before. Because I'm not resisting alcohol, because I now see alcohol as just this, like, foreign object that I have no story around. I've forgotten what it was like to like alcohol. I've forgotten what it's like to be buzzed. Like, those memories, the more time goes on, the more they're just, like, way behind me. And so I have no story around alcohol. I can go to a bar and feel nothing. It's like, it's kind of like, what it was like when I was a kid around alcohol. Like, I smell it and I'm like, why would you drink that stuff? That smells disgusting. And that's where I'm at now, because wine or alcohol just smells gross to me. I don't have the sense that something is missing or that I'm missing out on anything. And, like, even just the other night, I went to dinner with friends and they were drinking this, like, insanely expensive bottle of wine, and they're like, oh, don't you miss it? Don't you just want to try a little? And, like, I can say in all honesty, no, I do not miss it at all. I don't even want to try it. Like, I've seen the dark side of what alcohol can do, and I'm not even, I'm not craving it. I'm not tempted. I have absolutely no desire to try it or even go there. And there's so much peace that comes with that, and so much freedom that comes with that, because as I said before, it was like this mental prison of just resisting cravings and urges and like avoiding stuff. But now it's like I feel almost like invincible to the effects of alcohol. Like, yeah, I can see it, I can smell it, I can, you know, be marketed to it, like, and I just have no reaction to alcohol. And there's such a freedom that comes with that. And because I'm not in that like mental conflict all the time, I'm in this place where I can truly feel surrendered and feel like in the flow and just at ease and just to be, you know. When I was sober before, I felt like I was always doing something to distract myself and like not think about alcohol, like resist those thoughts, get it out of my mind. And now it's like alcohol doesn't even occur to me. The only time I think about alcohol is when I work in the realm of, you know, the Sinclair Method and helping people overcome alcohol addiction. So I think about alcohol every day, but it's really from a place of how can I help people overcome alcohol addiction, not from a place of me craving alcohol or wanting alcohol. It's just that whole piece has been erased. And the sobriety and the clarity that comes through the Sinclair Method, if that's your goal, there's just no comparison. There is no comparison. It's life-changing and incredible. And for me, I really feel like it's given me this opportunity to have like a reset button and just like start fresh without this story of alcohol addiction, without having, you know, alcohol really be a part of my life anymore. I'm just totally indifferent to it. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching. I always appreciate your guys' comments and messages, so feel free to reach out if you're so inclined, and I will talk to you all again soon.